Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, best-selling author and comic creator, Josh Grant. And today, our special guest is Anna Faversham. Anna is just a fantastic writer. She's just such a kind person too, and she writes kind of a span of genres. We'll kind of get a chance to talk about today, from like things like time travel, and we got a mystery, and we have all sorts of cool stuff happening. We have kind of historic fiction as well. And so just a bit about her before we bring her on. Anna Faversham has lived most of her life in Kent, England, but she's also lived in New Zealand and Central Africa. Both had a lasting influence on her life. Africa dragged her love of writing to the surface, living some 40 miles from the nearest tarmac road and 70 from anything pretending to be a bookshop. She soon ran out of bedtime stories for the children. Scribbling began. On returning to England, fiction had to take a backseat as real life took over. You know the sort of thing. A proper job to keep feeding the mortgage and growing the family, and chores, and more chores. Yeah, I got to get my chores done lately too. And so, but a love of writing finally erupted into regular tapping. She's written and read for the BBC and published short stories. Finally, a little more time was found. 5 novels and a book of short stories have been completed, and more are in the pipeline. She likes to include interesting facts in her writing, and is often the case that fact is stranger than fiction, as you probably know. The first book to be published was Hide in Time, a time travel romance. The second book was inspired by the smuggler's caves she visited as a child. The third is a sequel set in the Diamond Isle, the Isle of Wight. The fourth sees a perfect life turn into a nightmare. In her latest book, the character hiding off-grid is surprised by strangers knocking on his door, and it turns into worse than any nightmare you could ever imagine, or so she's told. So Anna writes this whole span of things. If you want to check out any of her works, you can check them out down in the description. At any time, we have her website and all of her books down there. I just want to welcome all the people that are viewing this live. Welcome. We got Jackson Taylor going crazy in the chat down there saying "Ree," and we have Dr. Wild as well. Just roll 39 YT. Go ahead and check out his channel. But yes, welcome all of you in the live chat. We got quite a few of you today, so by all means, throw Anna a question. We could put her in the hot seat at any point if you like. I'll throw your question up there. We'll put her on the spot. It'll be fun. But now that she's been waiting on the sidelines, and she hasn't run away yet. Now so we say we'll put her on the spot. Let's bring Anna on. Anna, welcome to Diabolic Shrimp.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's just so great to have you on. I was telling you earlier, it's just you're just such a wonderfully kind, supportive person, Anna, and I just love your writing.
Thank you. I like yours too.
It's decent. It pales in comparison. Well, Anna, I always love to just introduce people through just show and tell. I just think it's a fun way to introduce people. So, did you bring us for something for show and tell?
I did, yes. Now, this is not a tickling stick. It's a feather pen. I have it on my desk all the time to remind me that when Jane Austen and Charles Dickens and all my other favorite writers whose work has stood the test of time, they had a much more difficult time, didn't they, than I do when I'm writing. I mean, I think I'm plodding away at this and it's heavy going. Imagine dipping the pen into an inkwell, and maybe it will splodge all over what you've already written. And they couldn't backspace or delete all the stuff.
I still dip my pen into like ink wells. I guess you're not supposed to do that anymore. I don't know.
You don't tell me you've got one of these.
No, mine's just a regular pen, the clicky ones, but I just dip it, and I thought it was what you're supposed to do.
Oh, back in school days, I remember we had some school desks. You've just brought it back. And they must have been very creaky and old. They were. I mean, loads of people had scratched their initials in them and so on. But I can remember there was an empty hole at the front there. And I used to wonder what it was for. And then I found out it was for inkwells. And of course, well, you might use well, not many do.
I always thought that empty hole was just like for like drilling it out or whatever. You like kind of like dug it out. You know, you always had that kid that was like back there scratching. You can always hear them. You know. So yes, well, yeah, when you said that, it was just so. I always thought it was kind of just profound. You know, it's like looking at what the classics and people in the past had to work with, and even when they got to typewriters, it's like the old typewriters. I don't know if you ever tried to type on one, like those like the metal ones. It's like we used to have one when I was a kid, and like they'll break your finger if you try to type, and so it's just like
I remember them. Yes.
Yeah, well, and blows my mind. It's like I mean, what a great reminder. Of like, they definitely had it harder than some of us nowadays.
And it's such great writing.
Yes, well,
wonderful writing, and the time it must have taken them. They probably had cooks, cleaners, bottle washers.
Yeah. Well, and Shakespeare had it the hardest. He had to have all the thee and thous and banisheds. I can't write like that. I can't remember to write all those thees and thous. So, well, it's. Yeah, well, your writing, Anna, is just fantastic, and I know you've had this exciting life though. So let's get into your life first before we dive into your books. We'll talk all about like immortality. This is probably a novel. I always love that subtitle, and then we'll talk all about that one and all your books, and they're all down in the description if anyone wants to check them out. But let's dive into just a bit about you before we get there. Like. Tell us a bit about your world traveling adventures. Like, what was it like going to places like Africa or New Zealand?
Well, we went to New Zealand. I got married. My husband met someone who said about going to New Zealand. And cut a long story short, we went. It is an amazing country. It's absolutely wonderful. I learnt so much from the people. They were so hospitable. If there's anybody from New Zealand listening, thank you. I never get the opportunity to thank everyone, but they were absolutely wonderful. They taught me a lot about hospitality. We were both in our 20s, and we have a lot to learn at that age, I think. I'm still friends with, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 people there. So we have plenty of places to go and stay. And from now, we can go back there. My 2 children were born there. We lived in Wellington, where my son was born, and Auckland, where my daughter was born. Wellington is absolutely the most beautiful place you'd be. They say it's something like second only to San Francisco, the harbor.
Yeah.
In terms of acreage or however you measure the water.
Uh-huh.
And it really is the most beautiful sight. And I've got lots of pictures and things like that. So from there, we went to Africa when somebody wrote to my husband and said, what we really need is a business manager for this Central African, it was Zambia, Central African mission. And anyway, we went. That's cutting a long story short, with 2 small children, one at 6 months and one at 2.5. We went, and there was
that's so. I'm honestly just amazed by like just. I had some friends who were also missionaries in Africa, and they also went with young children, and it just blows my mind just the bravery of just moving to any new place, let alone moving to another continent with young kiddos. That must have been a bit of an adventure.
Well, 2 things I pick you up on there is we never thought of ourselves as missionaries.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't until we got back and people said missionaries, and we thought,
it sounds cool though. You're a missionary, you're on a mission.
Well, it was a bush mission. It was quite simple, but we didn't think of ourselves like that. And there was a war going on just 30 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Over the border, and sometimes we would see the planes going by, and sometimes the bush mission was raided by soldiers to see if we were harbouring any people we shouldn't be harbouring, but of course we weren't. And that was amazing. We would see the soldiers, bless their cotton socks, with no bullets in their guns, but, toting the guns and thinking they were the greatest.
Yeah.
Knew they had no bullets in them. And again, Africa, the people in Africa were wonderful. They had so little. When we were in Zambia, we could get flour, we could get sugar, and they grew sugar nearby, flour and sugar. And apart from that, really, it was hardly anything unless you grew it yourself. So I became a sort of mini farmer, or else we didn't eat, and we were all busy growing our little back garden sort of thing. But around us, I was totally awestruck. I had no idea I was going to a place where there were mud huts. And they were really mud huts. But the people were happy. And that taught me a lot as well. You think about that one, how little they had. If we, as Westerners, couldn't get anything more than flour and sugar and milk that was always off. If we couldn't, they definitely couldn't. And yet they were happy. So that taught me an awful lot. I really don't need a lot to be a happy person.
Yeah, I resonate with you on that. I had experience when I was younger. I was at a camp with kids, right? And I was taking care of them, and we had this massive flash flood. And I'll tell this story in about a week here for the Shrimpy Awards that we're about to have. But yep. I just had this moment where everything was utterly destroyed by this flash flood, and I just had this moment where the kids and I, all of our stuff was destroyed. Our shoes were destroyed. Like, we were going around without shoes, but luckily we all were okay. We didn't get hurt, and too bad. But it's but we were all sitting there, and we're all waiting for people to dig out this road and kind of get everyone out there. We were kind of stuck in the mountains, and but we had Red Cross bring us all these blankets and these pillows, and we had a cabin to stay in, so we had shelter and stuff. But these kids were just playing with all these blankets and making a blanket for it and laughing. And I just had this moment that's honestly one of the most profound moments in my life that where it just hit me, and I just stood back and just kind of teared up, just because it's that's all we really kind of need is each other, and that's a central piece of my being nowadays. So I kind of resonate with you on seeing people when they have so little that can be so happy. It just it just kind of blows my mind, just how little we actually really need as people.
I can remember one of them asked me to name their newborn baby, and of course I couldn't think. I just couldn't think on the spot of what would I call a newborn baby. And all I could think of, I think it was Christine or something like that, because it was the first thing that came into my mind at that time, and I thought I ought to know what that means, but I don't know what it means.
I feel for you getting put on the spot like that. I'm whenever I'm writing my books, I'm the worst at naming people on the spot. I get a new character in there. I'm what should I name them? I'm I'll think of it later. I'm just gonna name Yorple. So that poor kid would be named Yorple or something walking around.
Well, the thing is, there were loads of Africans all standing around, and she was nursing this baby, and I was walking through the village and all the mud huts and so on, and I really wasn't expecting that, but some of the children they called were things like, one was Toyota, because in the we had an ambulance, and I think it was the ambulance at Toyota or something. The baby boy was born in a vehicle, and it was a Toyota. They didn't get to the hospital in time. We were on a hospital and a school and so on, and they didn't get to the hospital in time. So the baby boy was called Toyota. This was in my mind, and I was thinking, I really must try and get some proper names. Of course, it doesn't matter, because probably a little while down the line, the baby will have had another name as well. But anyway, I named a baby, and these things stay with you. don't they?
Yes, I was like, I can't even imagine. I've named plenty of characters in books, but I can't say I've ever had the chance to name a baby. So, but all right. So for like, so traveling, especially like, I mean, yeah, it sounds like there were a lot of like kind of crazy things, like you said, a war going on. I can't even imagine
Yes.
being that
Well,
close to war, right? And I appreciate all the people that have, had to go through a war. And but did you experience any like culture shock moments?
yes. I think it was when we were picked up from the airport, and I'll backtrack a little bit. From the time that we were asked to go to the time that we actually went, it was something like 2 months. And so we really hadn't had any time to gen up on what we were going to, more than a little bit, especially when you've got a newborn baby, sort of 4 months old. So by 6 months, we went. When we were picked up from the airport, we drove along a tarmac road for about 40 miles. But the next 40 miles was over a roughshod mud road, basically. Which, when it was raining, you couldn't really get anywhere because you got stuck in the mud, which we did on a but coming down the mud road, I saw on either side it was it was bush, just sort of sandy soil and a bush here and there, no trees or anything like that. And in the distance, I saw all these wonderful trees. And I thought, whatever can that be? And it was the Bush Mission, where they had nurtured the trees and grown trees and built a dam for the people around, so that it was better for them from the river. I've forgotten the name of the river. But you had to watch out for crocodiles and things like that.
Oh gosh,
So,
that's my nightmare. I'm like have nightmares about crocodiles. So.
And snakes and things. But I think the main thing was seeing the trees ahead. They were jacaranda trees, and they were absolutely wonderful. But coming up to the gates, up as far as the gates of the mission, it was mud huts. And I really didn't think people lived in mud huts in these days or those days, but they're still living in them these days. But you learn that actual fact, they're actually quite good for for being in that situation.
Yeah, well, cooling and things like that. They're like designed that way. It's the same with like Adobe out west in the United States. It's like it was the same kind of thing. It's like Adobe was really well for cooling and also keeping it warm at night. And it's like doing one or the other. Like mud huts were always good for that.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Fortunately, we didn't have to live in a mud hut.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun though, for a bit anyway. But like, so like you, all right. So you visited, like you mentioned, you visited like the smuggler caves as a child. Like
yes.
what was that all about? I mean, I've never heard of like the smuggler caves.
Right. Okay. So I live on the Kent coast. Now the Kent is for Americans or anywhere else that people come from who are listening. The Kent coast is the bit on the southeast of England that sticks out into the sea, like so. And I'm right on the very tip. I live right on the very tip. And on the north coast and on the south coast, the smugglers they would basically they couldn't afford to pay tax on one of my books tells more or less about this. The taxes were so high that they smuggled in goods, and in payment they would smuggle out the sheep that Kent is very famous for. So they would pay with sheep to get in brandy and various things from France. So they would come in, but there were revenue men who would try and catch them. But the revenue men, poor things, they were often only on foot, sometimes on horseback, but one or two against a whole crowd of smugglers. Now, so the smugglers would come in by ship. They would land on a beach where there were caves, and it's chalk around here. and it would land on the beach and come into the caves, and the donkeys would take it up through the caves and back to the villages. And that's how the caves came about.
So you're saying, yeah. So Anna Faversham is actually a modern day smuggler living there in the smuggler. No, so you visited that. Like how that like influence your writing? Like how did some of your like these travels, right? It's like influence your writing.
Right. So the caves influenced it. with the first book I wrote was One Dark Night, even though the first one I published was Hide in Time. But One Dark Night is all about the smugglers' caves. It stuck in my mind. And then the next book, Under a Dark Star, which has
yes. Oh, hold it up. Yeah, hold it up. Like get it right up there in the camera. We're all about shameless self-promotion here. So Under a Dark
Star. My husband, when I first met him, told me that he had a forebear, an ancestor who used to be a smuggler. But we laughed about it because we said, these tales go around about, yes, we had smugglers in the family, or we had, somebody famous or whatever. And it wasn't until we went to the Isle of Wight on a little holiday where the smuggler was supposed to have lived. I went to my first boot sale. Do you have boot sales?
I'm not sure what a boot sale actually is. I was like, I was trying to load up my Englishisms. It's like not fizzy pop, it's soda. But so
they open up the boot of what you call it, the trunk, I think, on the back of a car, and people sell things.
Oh, we call it a flea market.
Something like that, yes. So I bought a book, and it was all about the history of the Isle of Wight, you see, and in it was this name who was the ancestor of my husband.
Oh wow!
And I discovered it was all true. So bells and whirly things went round in here, and that's how Under a Dark Star was born. He only has a very small spot because I didn't want to get sued.
Well, we got the full Faversham family, all smugglers, all of them.
I have to say this was back in sort of 1700 and something, right?
So you say. That's a good defense.
California. I loved California. I absolutely adored it. That was with work. I used to work for American Express. And loved that. San Francisco in particular, I liked. I'm not sure where you are, but
yeah, well, that's great to hear. I'm going to get a chance to check out San Francisco for the first time soon.
Oh, really?
So I'm excited about that.
I beat me to it.
So, all right. So before we dive into your books, I've noticed, it's like you've dedicated, some of your books to the Swan. Care to explain what that's all about?
Well, this actually, excuse me, sorry, I'm losing my voice. You don't get to talk much when during the lockdown, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Just like it's okay. This channel is my one social experience for the whole pandemic. So thank you, Anna, for coming on and being my social interaction.
Yes, quite. Oh, we were having our little holiday on the Isle of Wight, but my husband was called away for work, and I was therefore left on my own for about 4 or 5 days. And so I went off to a little beach, drove to a little beach where there was nobody on the beach. But I knew there would be hardly anybody. That's why I went. So there was nobody on this beach. And
doing some smuggling, Anna. I see. That's I'm on to you.
It is in the blood. Not mine, though. It is. And I sat down with my little chair, and I got my books out and started to read. And a swan, now this is on the beach with the sea, and a swan waddled up to me and sat down next to me.
Wow.
You can't see here, but I mean, which hand? This hand. It was just here. I could have stroked it, only I was too frightened to stroke it in
Yeah, I
case.
know, especially a swan, like get
Oh,
bit.
yes, so I couldn't believe it, because I'd sat there and I thought, oh, we were going to have this wonderful holiday. It was going to be this, that, and the other. We should be doing this. And here I am, all on my own, sitting on the beach, all on my own. And the swans, they usually go around in twos. And so the other swan came round and he sat the other side, but about a yard away. So he wasn't quite so friendly. But this one sat there and, we started talking to each other. It was completely ridiculous, you know.
Well, what a magical, that's so magical though. I just, it's like, I would be a little bit terrified because we get geese all the time out here, and they're mean. They'll hunt you like little velociraptors. But a swan though, it's just like, that's so cool.
I was amazed. I couldn't believe it. I thought, why is this swan? Why has it chosen to sit next to me? And I went through all this, probably sheltering from the wind, but then the other one was next to me, the other side, so that couldn't be right. He just sat there. And I felt pinned there because I didn't want to move.
Yeah.
In case it bit me.
So you got held hostage by a swan. Oh no.
I was there about 2.5 hours, and in the end it was getting quite cold, and I thought, I think I'm definitely going to have to move. So, but I thought, how nice that a swan came and sat next to me when I was all alone. And I thought, oh dear, we were supposed to be having this holiday, and I wasn't grumpy. I was just haven't got anybody to talk to. Not you don't when you're on holiday if you don't know anybody. So I felt alone, and the swan was there. So I have dedicated my I think it's immortality. I dedicated it to the swan because I thought it was rather nice. It's all I could offer to say thank you. It doesn't know, but I let everybody know that swans can be really nice, good company.
That's just, I just think it's magical. Once again, I connect with you though, just because it's like, it's like I was up in the mountains working at that same camp I had the flash flood experience in, and I was walking one night back to my cabin after my night off, and I just hear like footsteps behind me, and I'm like, oh gosh, what is following me? Like, what's coming to eat me? It's like, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna turn around and like punch the mountain lion or whatever. And like I whip around, and it's a fox, and this fox walks right up to me and sits down and just sits there and just stares at me, and I'm just staring at it like, what? Because foxes, they're pretty skittish creatures. And like, so I like picked up a stick and I like just threw it, and this fox goes and it fetches the stick and it brings it back to me. And I was like, I am playing fetch with the fox. This is the coolest thing ever. And like, he became my pal all summer long. Like he would show up, and it was kind of a bummer because you kind of had to like scare him off because like, it's like, you don't want him being close to people, and like, because people aren't up there all the time, and he's going to starve to death if he doesn't learn to stay away from people. And so but it was just a kind of a magical experience. So I kind of vibe with you on that. So here, let's get into immortality, since that was an immortality, and that's what you dedicated to. Here, I'll share with you the first lines for immortality. And immortality is so fantastic. I just love the mystery of that one. I just love it. It just draws you in right from the get-go. And so here's our first lines, and I always add it, and then the murders began after the first lines of every book I ever read, just for my own personal gain. So let's see how well it works. Dark clouds obscured the promised blood moon. Chester looked across the top of the Tower Bridge to the southeast sky. The longest lunar eclipse of the 21st century would have made a stunning video. It wasn't to be. And then the murders began. It actually really kind of works. And so, but this novel, Immortality, does start with just this. I mean, we just dive right in with Chester, and he's kind of has this, he talks about, another character named Kate, and then we kind of jump into like a little bit of travel in that book too. But it's like, it's
Dubai.
Yeah, it just jumps right in, and it just draws you in because you're just instantly kind of thrown into this mystery of what's going on with this guy, and so tell us just a bit. And it's tricky because I love your writing, especially just because you do have this mystery element to pretty much all your writing. It's just like there's always something going on. That's what I love about it. That's what I like to write too. And so tell us a bit about immortality, and I guess do your best to be spoiler free, even though we can talk a bit about it, because it's like I just love that mystery. I don't want to like spoil kind of what's going on with some of these characters. So, but just tell us a bit about immortality in general.
I'll tell you how it was inspired. Growing up, I've enjoyed looking at the moon and the stars and things, not to any great extent, but I've always wondered what's out there. If there's all those stars and some of them have got planets, what are on those planets? Are we the only ones? And so on. So that was the inspiration. Now, Chester, who's grown up a nice Quaker, my other books, they're all Church of England, because if you date back the historical ones, everybody went to church, whether you liked it or not. Mm-hmm. So Chester, he came from a Quaker family, which kind of sets him as having good morals, good standards, and so on. And he had reason to hide. He was being sought by an organized crime gang, which I probably shouldn't have said that, because that's one of the things you find out as you go along. But anyway.
Well, now it's out there. It's a venture now.
No, there's a lot more to it than that, of course.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And he went off to hide in New Zealand, and he had to leave Kate behind. He was an investigative reporter, and I have a great admiration for those kind of reporters. They're very brave, and they do a good job. So he was hiding out in the middle of the North Island, which, if you know New Zealand, that's as good as being in the middle of nowhere, really, because it's the same size as Britain.
Well, that's kind of where a lot of the volcanoes are too, I think, on the North Island, right?
Yeah. yes, all that. And he's quite close to the volcanoes, and they play a small part in it. And he's very wealthy, and he was able to buy some land, and that's where he's escaped to. And in no time at all, he starts to have knocks on the front door. Now, since he's got a big fence all the way round, he cannot work out how these people keep knocking on his door, and it's always at night time. So this is the bit I'm not going to tell you about, of course, who these people are. But they have different tales to tell, and they take him away. He when he gets back in the morning, he thinks he's been asleep until he realizes he's got something in his hands that could not be from anywhere but somewhere very distant. So it's part of the mystery is, why are these people coming to him? Before too long, I think it's by about chapter 3, you know where they are taking him. And each one takes them, I think it's about 5 who come, and each one takes them to something different. And then you find out where it is, but he wants to know why.
Yeah, well, and one of the things I love about your writing is in several of your books, right? It's like you really do, you dive right in, but it's like it's an art to like dive right in, but also maintain the mystery, right? It's like sometimes people dive right in, and it's just like, oh, it's all just like right up front, but it's like you dive right in, so it just draws you in right away. But it also, like, you also have that mystery of like you maintain that mystery of like why, like you said early on, you kind of know where they're taking him, but it's like you don't necessarily know why, and that is just it drew me in definitely. And so
good. And of course there was the swan who protected him, as one might say. He sat on the doorstep, and the swan knew about the visitors, and he would decide whether or not the visitor got entrance or not. And he always let them in, so it was a bit of a letdown, really. But he was meant to be a sort of protection officer, if you like. So I gave the swan a part to play.
Nice. It's like, well, and like, so for you, like all your books, like you write in a variety of genres, but like all your books kind of tend to have kind of some element of mystery to them. So what would you say is kind of like the key to crafting a compelling mystery?
Make them wait.
Even though, like I said, like you really do drive in and give people enough information, but like I say, you do like, you always had that bit of mystery. There's always something else to see, and that's what I loved about it.
Yeah, I think it's a case of it's a bit like life. You meet someone, and you might know a certain amount about them, but you don't know everything about them. And it's only as you get to know things that it's revealed. And so in my books, it's revealed slowly. But what I don't like is it all being revealed all in the last chapter, all in everything piles in, and he's did that and they did that, and you don't know, well, why, So I tend to reveal as I go along, and perhaps save one of the biggest one. I think that's what happens in Immortality, is save it till the end as to why he is writing this, why he's had to go through this, and what he has to do.
Well, it's just like this. We were able to reveal your smuggling roots here, but we don't know why yet, Anna. But we'll figure it out. I'll maintain that. I'll get that out there at some point. So, well, all right. So you've written like, because we're going to talk about Immortality, but we can talk about all your books too. It's like you've written in kind of a variety of genres. You got you got like some time travel, you got some speculative fiction, you had some like there's a lot of travel in all your books and things, and romance too. That's what I was going to say. Like you got the historical romance piece. Like what was kind of like the hardest for you to create? I mean, you're so talented, kind of going across the span, but like, what was kind of a challenging one for you to kind of get out there?
I think probably the historical romance trilogy. It's a trilogy, really, but you can read the first and the second, and you don't need to read. Well, yes, you should. You should start at the beginning. Really
yes, we're about shameless self-promotion. Read them all, everybody, because her books are fantastic. So don't listen to her, Anna. Her books are great. Read every one of them.
I think that took me the longest, because I was still working, and I was sort of coming home and doing a little bit here and there. So, but it was the research. Let's put it like this. I failed history at school, dramatically failed history at school. But I learned to like history, and I loved the research, and I found all sorts of different things. And sometimes I wouldn't write many words in a day at all. I've just been doing the research and loving every minute of it, making loads of notes. I've got piles of notes, sort of this high, and I've never used them, but it was jolly interesting. But it was a challenge. And then Hide in Time, that time travel, because it was contemporary and historical, it kind of took a little bit of the pain of research off until I got to the time travel, and I thought, hang on a minute, I've got to make this realistic. But I loved it. I've loved writing. I really have. Honestly, the lockdown hasn't worried me in the slightest. I've just sat here tapping away.
Definitely, writing has definitely been helpful for myself too during the pandemic days. It's like it's kind of helped to free up some time too, I guess. Like,
yes.
So, all right. So, like, I mean, you use time travel in a bit in your books, and you also write historic romance and doing the research, right? So, if you had the chance to travel through time, Anna, where would you go, and why?
Oh,
Or
gosh.
when would you go? I guess I should say.
Where and when? Do you know, I have absolutely no idea. You'd think I'd have worked that one out, wouldn't you? I should have done. I don't think I'd want to go back to the times I've written about 1814 to 1820 something. Certainly not if I were anything but a pretty lady. Oh, I don't think I'd want to be a pretty lady in a big house either. You know, how boring is that? No, whoa, no. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea.
I ask these questions, and when I think about them myself, I was like, what would I say? And for me, I'm like, I would not want to go back in time at all. Like, not even like 10 years. I lived through all that stuff. It's like I just like now. It's like if I went back to like medieval times or the Renaissance, it'd be so cool. And then I'm like, yeah, no, I was like, no plumbing, and I'm good.
Yes. Yeah, exactly right. No, I just don't think I would want to go back in time. I'm so sorry. I mean, I go back in
we'll
time.
Go forward in time.
Right?
I said I'll go forward in time.
Not that either.
Have like holographic stuff, I guess. I don't know. So all right. Well, here's your challenge. Since that was already the challenge question, I'm going to give you the even more challenge question. Especially as a writer, if you had to destroy all of your books but one of them, and that is the one that you will be known for, which one would you save and why? I know this is such an impossible question as a writer because they're all your children, but
how do you murder your babies?
That's you're going to have to. This is the diabolic part of Diabolic Shrimp.
You are. Yeah.
So, like, which book would you just love to be known for? I know all your books, and I love your work. I've read multiple ones of yours, but what would be one you would just love to be known for?
Ooh, I don't know. Perhaps Hide in Time.
Yeah,
that seems to be the most popular, and perhaps that. Then perhaps Immortality, or perhaps.
as Anna lists all of hers. Read them in the description. They're all down there. And if you want down the road, if you're watching this, you can comment down the road here, and I'll make sure she gets to hear the proper answer to this. Read all of her books, and then you can tell Anna which book she should be known for.
Yes, that would help. The one that made me cry was One Dark Soul.
Yeah.
I sat there and ended up crying. I thought I'll have to go and make a cup of tea.
Yeah. What was it about that one that really just got you emotionally?
Oh, I think you'll understand this, but I can't tell it exactly as it is because it gives away the story.
Yeah.
It's about a person who has had a terrible, terrible upbringing, and ends up being a pretty awful person. But nobody knows. In One Dark Soul, they don't know that that's what happened to him until he does something which kind of blows his cover, really, as to he's not a nice person at all, really. And yet he had tried to be. And then, and I really cried the fact that he hadn't any hope whatsoever of being a truly good person. He had mimicked it, and he hadn't really any hope until dear old Raffles, Parson Raffles, helps him out, and it ends in Canterbury Cathedral. Now, in Canterbury Cathedral, there was a death a long, long time ago. Now, what was his name? Forgotten. You'll all know. They'll all know who it was. A very, very famous king, somebody or the other, said to his knights, if only they'd get rid of that man, and they killed him in the cathedral. And it's very, very well known. Now, this is the second time, something pretty awful happens in the cathedral. And I was, in my mind, I was in the cathedral, and this was happening to this poor person. And I ended up having to go and make a cup of tea.
Yeah, I feel you on the most emotional book I guess I ever wrote. I always try to put emotion in my books and speak to, like, you know, I've had hard things happen to me in life, and I draw from that sometimes in my writing, and in finding hope in dark places. A lot of my writing will talk about that, but I was writing a Nexus, and Nexus is very near and dear to my heart. Just like the tough things I had this kid go through and in his life, but it was all about overcoming those tough things. But it was like, that was a very emotional book for me. I was kind of like you. I was like, I got to go. Well, for me, I'm a soda-holic. So I'm like, I got to go have myself a soda, you know, it's killing my teeth, but I'm emotional now. And so that was a rough one to get through. I was like, for a few months, I was just kind of depressed all the time, right? Trying to write this deep. I mean, it's not like a bad, like, emotion, but it's like, but it's deep. It's deep and it hits you. And that's the challenge.
What's that one called?
Oh, that one was Nexus. That's my young adult.
Nexus.
Yeah, it's like a kid surviving the robot apocalypse, but it's all about the value of humanity and why human beings are valuable, and it kind of speaks to the soul a bit. And so for you, like, going again, what was one of your just characters you just loved creating? That when you were creating characters across your books, like, who is a character that you just absolutely loved getting to create?
Parson Raffles, he is actually molded on someone I know. Parson Raffles is a huge, great man in the book, you know, and the man that I did ask him if I might use him as I call them coat hangers, you know, where you sort of hang things on, and he's a lovely guy, and years after I'd done this, he always said, I always wanted to be in a book. He said, but nobody's ever written about me. And I said, but you've been reading about yourself. You know, Parson Raffles for me was a wonderful, wonderful person, and he walks through four of the books. Yes, he walks through four of the books, starts in Hiding Time, and miraculously he makes it over into One Dark Night. Because everybody liked Parson Raffles.
Nice.
And him.
Well, and I just think that is so brave of you to, like, write. I can just never write an actual person. That people are always asking, like, can you put me in the book? And I'm like, I can't, because it's like, if I put people in the book, I know that I end up killing them off early or something. If it's like a horror book originally, and it's like, because it's like I don't know how to write them, so I had to get rid of them. So they got eaten by a monster. So hopefully Raffles doesn't get eaten.
Really, really pleased he was in the end. He said, you know, I prayed that would happen. And I said, well, the prayer was answered about 5 years ago.
All right, so like, we're running a little short on time, and I do want to make sure we get a chance to read a piece of your work, because I love your work, Anna, and so I want to make sure I get to highlight it. And so this is a chapter from Immortality, and this is chapter 35, and so we're a decent way in, right? And we're going to get just a glimpse of some of these characters, you know, like a glimpse of what's going on in Immortality. Can you set the stage for us before we read a bit?
Right.
Like what's just generally happening in leading up to this chapter, in this chapter?
Okay. Our hero, here known as Andy, his real name is Chester, but he's been undercover, has returned from his hideout in New Zealand, where he had to endure strange occurrences galore. Now he's back in England. He's staying with his editor-in-chief for his own safety. However, he could hide from the criminals, but there are some things he has learnt that you just can't hide from. And so this is what it's all about. It's
excellent. Excellent. Okay, so here we go. Like, I'll be our narrator. I'll read some of our parts, and you can read some of our other parts. And so here
So
we
you're the
are.
boys and I'm the girls. Is that right?
That sounds like a plan. It sounds like fun. So,
Okay.
all right. Wednesday the 30th, January 2019. A loud knocking on Andy's door woke him. Startled, he hurried to open the door, only just remembering to fling a dressing gown around him. Alexei, the butler, stood outside. Sir, forgive me for waking you in such a way. Breakfast will be served in half an hour. Puzzled, Andy thanked him. He glanced across to the carriage lock on the bedside cabinet. Midnight. Of course not. It must be midday. He'd overslept, understandably. He'd just experienced what must go down in history as the longest ever night. He drew the curtains. Gray daylight. The carriage clock had stopped. He had half an hour to shower and dress, and then he'd see Kate. He all but ran to the bathroom. Dressed and bouncing like popping corn, he seized his phone, shoved it in his pocket, and headed towards the dining room. Only Carol was there. My apologies. I'm clearly late.
Everyone is. We've all overslept. Do you have the correct time?
Andy drew out his phone, stared and frowned. It must be faulty. It says midnight. Carol's eyes grew large.
All the clocks have stopped, every single one, including those in the staff quarters.
And do they all say midnight?
All stuck at 12 o'clock, yes.
She appeared concerned.
Alexis put the television on and is resetting all the clocks.
Lord Rosen strode into the dining room to show Andy. He lifted the lid on the dish of the bacon on the sideboard, releasing one of the aromas Andy liked best. Confounded nuisance. Damned Ruskies. Andy nodded in agreement, though he knew better. It was always best to agree with the boss. His curiosity was unstoppable regardless. David? He hesitated. Do you know who rescued me in the underground? I should like to thank him. Reward him. I do know, and as your employer, I thanked him on your behalf. Found him a well-paid job, too. He'd been a waiter, but his qualities had been recognized and are better rewarded now. Alexei brought a pot of coffee, set it at the back of the sideboard, and bowed his head slightly. David tipped his head, too, and in that moment, Andy realized who rescued him. He wandered over to the windows and shut his eyes for a few seconds. His thoughts wavered between will it never stop and the comforting thought that he had never felt better in all his life. Kate glided in. Her long dark hair fell in curls around her shoulders, making him feel even better. A look sparkled between them, excluding everyone and everything else. Muttering about the clock stopping at midnight, they all helped themselves to scrambled eggs and tomatoes, with Kate and Andy piling on some bacon. Damned hackers, grumbled David again. I hope it's not affecting the office. Striding towards the table, he sat and ate heartily. I have to dash off. However, you two, he nodded at Kate and Andy. I'll send the car for you about 1. Your desks await. He grinned. And so does a pile of work.
He never stops,
said Carol, indicating her husband with an elegant forefinger. 20 minutes later, Andy and Kate were on their own, sitting side by side at the table. Alexei entered, announced the time, 9:15, and inquired if they'd like another pot of tea. Each smiled at the other and thanked the butler as he cleared their plates, asking him to take the tea to the drawing room. Both could hardly contain themselves, knowing they would soon be alone together, so they abandoned their toast and headed for the drawing room. A huge arrangement of lilies stood in front of the window, filling the room with their scent. Andy shut the door behind him and took her in his arms, squeezing her far too tightly.
Andy, I can't breathe.
He loosened his hold, picking her up and carried her, putting her down in such a way that her legs trailed across his as he sat on the sofa. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, realizing it might be uncomfortable for her. The time had reset itself to 9:20. Andy grinned knowingly. It could... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It couldn't have been Russian hackers, could it? Surely he was joking. Do you think this might have happened all over London?
Nonchalantly, he replied. Who can tell?
You have a theory, don't you?
I do indeed. And before I ask you something important, I promise I will tell you all about it. Right now, we have priorities to attend to. He kissed her, a perfect way of avoiding her questions. Questions might be avoided all morning like this. And then the murders began. No, I'm just joking. So, oh yes. Well, I just love
He's
like,
got to wait for the mystery as well. Even
yeah.
Kate has to wait.
That's right. And, well, like I just love like, yeah, just getting to see some of these characters. Please do, if you're watching, like check out Anna's books down there in the description. Just fantastic characters. Just great chance to like jump across history in some of them as well. And so Anna, we're unfortunately we're running low on time. How can we support you as an author? We do have, again, to our audience, like we have Anna's books down in the description. We have her website down there. So please do jump out, tell her hello, buy some of her books, tell other people about her books if you think they'd enjoy them. But Anna, how else can we support you?
Well, when I started writing, I made up my mind to sacrifice the social media involvement. I can't do everything in life, and probably that was a big mistake. So any kind of boost you can give me on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and so on would be extremely helpful, because I just don't get involved in any of those. It takes me ages to write a book, and if I were to get involved in social media, then I'd possibly not get anything written for yonks. I do take an active part in Goodreads, which is where I met you, Josh.
Yes.
I got as far as belonging to Facebook, but I just keep in touch with my brother. So if anyone's watching and has read and enjoyed my books, then I'd be delighted if you send info to your followers, because I haven't got any, because I'm not even on there. And this Thursday, Immortality is on a Kindle countdown deal.
Yeah.
Reduced to 99 cents. That happens to be coincidence. I'd have made it today if I'd realized, but it's from Thursday. 99p or 99 cents. So in the US and UK.
Awesome. So Thursday, well, and once again, we have a link to these down below. So do check that out. And Thursday sounds like a great deal. So
yeah, you just have to wait. You just have to wait.
the mystery is coming. All right. Well, Anna, it was such a blast. We'll hopefully get a chance to get you back on here in a few months' time. But hey, thank you for being on Diabolic Shrimp.
Thank you. You're the most helpful chap I've come across.
Oh, that's really nice of you. I was like, well, I'm going to send you back to your smuggling duties back down below. So thank you, Anna, for being on.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you all for checking out Diabolic Shrimp here. Please do, if you want to support this channel, please do hit that subscribe button down below. It's a free thing you can do to support us and support other authors. Any extra money I make from this channel or from my books, I give to universally good things like childhood disease research or trying to break the poverty cycle, things like that, ocean exploration. So please do come out, support Anna and her books down there in the description. Diabolic Shrimp, my website, is down there in the description as well. Please do join us this Saturday. That's Saturday, May 1st at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We're going to have our first ever Shrimpy Awards, where we get to celebrate some of our authors that submitted to the Shrimpy Awards, where they can win a prize. It's going to be like the Oscars, but bigger. And so do come check out the Shrimpy Awards coming up this Saturday. But thank you very much for joining us. This has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.